Over the last decade, Ethiopia has seen one of the fastest growing economies in the world, with an average annual growth rate of 9.4%. And the country's GDP has currently slowed down to 6.6% due to COVID-19 and the conflict in North Ethiopia. This business climate, just the country's business climate is undergoing significant changes with broad policy reforms and government plans to privatize leading state-owned enterprises signal a significant shift toward market-based reforms and a new flexibility with respect to economic policy making. This is ETV Special Edition, and I'm Sentaro Tamrat with this edition. And today's edition will focus on Ethiopian export industry, the potential, the challenges so far, and how the country can extricate itself from these challenges. And my guest today is Edo Abdi, who is owner of Edo International Trading and also the Vice President of Ethiopian Pulses, Oilseeds and Spices Processors and Exporters Association. Thank you for joining us, and a very warm welcome to you, Edo.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, so today's discussion will focus on how Ethiopia can just use its potential for the export sector, for boosting up its export sector, as well as challenges exhibited in the sector so far and the ways out. We will also try just to see how the country can bring or attract more foreign direct investment to the country, and whether Ethiopia is a country easy for business doing. Well, so let's start our first point with Ethiopia's potential for the export trade, and what's your observation on that?
Thank you, Sentaro, for having me to this special edition. Ethiopia, as you all know, that it is an agrarian society, and mainly the agriculture is the major economy of this nation. Over the last decade, the government is working very seriously to enhance, the agricultural sector so that the industry will take over the agricultural part. But yet, the major exportable commodities from Ethiopia are agricultural commodities. So, because of the location that we are in, because of the agroclimatic condition that we have, Ethiopia is blessed, to produce various types of agro-commodities. Almost over 66% of the Ethiopian GDP is agriculture-based. So, from all the export items, over 75% is agricultural commodities. In that regard, the opportunities that we have, the potential that we have to produce these agricultural commodities is very immense and very huge. Nevertheless, we are not as such taking, a very solid, very concrete and promising step towards enhancing, the production and the productivity. But, the government has been putting, its possible maximum efforts in the past, but that is not enough. You know that, the Ethiopian foreign currency earning hit, 3.6 billion last year, which was really the maximum in history. That's mainly due to, the upcoming of, the gold into the export market, but the other product is not increasing. That's one thing. Given that, the potential that we have, the very conducive agroclimatic conditions, given that, the location that we are in, because we are very close to major buying countries like the GCC. If you take, from here to Jeddah port, probably it would be 2 days. From here to Chennai, 5 days. Pakistan, Afghanistan, major pulses and agro-commodity, buying countries are very close to Ethiopia. So we didn't take, the maximum possible opportunity from that. It's mainly because of maybe the policy issues, maybe, the agriculture is not well mechanized, or it's not, it's not commercialized. There are various factors. So, having said this, if we really, are in a position to take a maximum possible advantage of what we have, I'm sure Ethiopia can double, this export in the next 3 to 5 years.
You have been just engaged in the export sector for several years now, and you are also the vice president of the Association of Exporters, as I mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
And so, what are just the complaints you hear both from locals and foreign exporters?
Um, yeah, Ethiopian export, has been there for many decades, but it is not in a way that it is being professionalized or it's being, putting, all the things in place, and it doesn't show the exporters, where they have to go from certain point. We keep on exporting for the last 30, 40 years, the raw materials, the raw as a raw. We don't add any value to it. And we are not, specializing in the export industry sector. Yeah. That's the biggest challenge still we have, and our exporters need to think about, how we can maximize, foreign currency earning. In Europe, half kg of white pea beans may worth, like $3, half a kg. But if we add a little value to that, we could have maximize that profit into our country. And if you take coffee, very recently, people started, roasting and grinding and sending that coffee. So if you look at the price, the profit margin, it's much higher than sending the raw coffee. So that's from the exporter's perspective. From the other side, the production is not increasing. We have adequate arable land, and that land has to be allocated, segregated according to what type of product that land is supposed to produce. If you take Omara area, it is mainly producing sesame. If you go down to the Shabalia Valley to Somali region, it's highly fertile and conducive for production of sesame. But if you look at the figure over the last 10 years, instead of increasing, our sesame production is declining. Why? Because we are not using, the production down there in the opportunity in Somali region, the opportunity in Bali region. So this must be, enhanced. The production must be doubled. If you look at also the white pea beans and other, agricultural commodities, they are really, the production is not as such increasing. All this will put pressure on our foreign currency earning. So there must be a strategy whereby the exporters will be, encouraged and incentivized to get a land at ease without any bureaucracy, because that's part of, our export strategy. I think the Ministry of Trade and Regional Integration has recently developed Ethiopian export strategy document, which such and other issues are also incorporated. So we need to have a very crystal clear strategy as to how we can shift, the current production trend into a bumper production. If you take a chickpeas, probably in Ethiopia, in Africa, we are the only producer of chickpeas. If you take the Arab countries, they are the major consumers of chickpeas. So where are they getting these chickpeas if we are not supplying to them? They are buying expensive from Argentina, from Canada, from Australia, while Ethiopia is next to their door. So it has to be strategized in a way that Ethiopia has to take advantage of all the neighboring countries, especially the GCC countries. They are economically capable, petroleum-rich economy, so they have they have the currency to pay. Sure. They can afford it. So on our side, we have to get ready to have that bumper production. We have to increase the acre of land that we produce every year. And second, we have to add value to it. Third, we have to process it in a very quality way so that they can be attracted, because these GCC countries are a quality sensitive world. So we need to be able to do to that expectation. And the other one is, currently we are facing some challenges. Ethiopia is not the only country that produces chickpeas or sesame or green mung bean. Now, because of the economic advantage, most countries are shifting from probably oil-based to maybe industry or to agriculture. If you look at Sudan, after secession of the two Sudans, the other Sudan, the South Sudan, economy is now dependent on sesame. So what they do is they increased the acre of land and the main economy became sesame. We are not doing that. And most countries, East African countries, Central West African countries like Chad, Burkina Faso, Nigeria, they are becoming, sesame producers. So that China was the largest buyer of Ethiopian sesame 6, 7, 10 years ago. And perhaps 60 to 70% of our sesame is going to China. But now because of the price issue, because of default, because of quality, and because of timely delivery to their port, now China market is almost over 60-70% is diverted to the West African countries. Now, if you look at the East African countries, a very emerging agricultural exporting countries like Mozambique, Tanzania, Now they are producing, this green mung bean, which is an emerging export commodity in Ethiopia as well. So we need to crystallize, our export strategy, and we need to be very conscious about it, because it is mandatory for us. We don't have any other option to earn a foreign currency. So we need to capitalize on how we can maximize, the foreign currency earning.
Okay, so you have told us that the Ethiopian, for example, sesame production we can take is not just increasing in volume for the last decades or so. Why do you think is that?
The export strategy document was not there, which really shows the path how we can go from X to Y. The number of exporters is increasing from, maybe 100 to 1,000 or 10,000. And still this large number of exporters competing for a given amount of production. So when you come to the trading platform and you buy a sesame, all the exporters, they want to get, as much quantity as they want, and they don't deliver it in time. It has got its own negative impact if you don't get, adequate contract volume. So that's one thing. The second thing, the Ministry of Agriculture need to have a strategy whereby they increase, for example, the sesame production or chickpeas production every year, 10%, 20%. They have to make sure that it is really increasing. It could, incur them. It may need some support in terms of finance or availability of quality seed, or monitoring and evaluation of extension workers as to how they can engage with the farmers. So there are a set of packaged approach in a way that, we can ensure that the production is really increasing. And the other one is, we always depend on a certain type of commodity in a given location. We are not expanding it. Depending on the agroclimatic condition and the soil type, we need to diversify. Apart from do this in Shabelle Basin, we can do this in Bali, we can do this in Benishangul Gumuz. So why we only locate, localize ourselves in that given area? So these are the things that we need to do, and we need to have a very synchronized and coordinated efforts of all the stakeholders.
Okay. Well, so it's just a paradox that having a very conducive climate for agro-processing and exporting this agro-processed material is value adding to most of the agricultural products. Ethiopia is augmenting its products. Production and productivity has not been just given the attention you are just telling me.
Yeah, the government has given a big priority now for production of, like if you look at the wheat.
Yeah,
under the cluster, system. That's actually the priority for the citizens, in order to have food security. But export, in my opinion, equivalently, we can do this for the export sector as well. The farmers, Ethiopian farmers, have the same type of stereotype of, farming and harvesting and production. So we can bring together these farmers who are really producing, fragmented smallholder farmers. This is the effort of actually the government and the exporters as well. Because the government has started some new initiatives, in contract farming, so that the exporters directly goes to the farmer, they share resource, supply seed, and supply some, chemicals like pesticide or fungicide, and whereby the farmers will produce in a very close supervision from the Warada or Kabale, health agricultural extension workers. So at the end of the day, that farmer will definitely supply to the exporter without an intermediary. This ensures the quality, and you share the resource, and you have a faster delivery time, and you maintain, adequate stock for your export supply. So I think, it is effort of all the stakeholders. The exporters themselves need to have the concept of supporting the farmers, supporting the agricultural sector in various ways. It could be, technology, it could be, sharing the resources so that the farmers have a better, capability and strengths so that they can produce more. Because as you know, the farmers, basically they farm what they need. Or sometimes, they sell half of it and keep the rest for his family. And instead of doing that, if the exporters have the resource and they have the opportunity to bring in the technologies, so they can share with the farmer and they can maximize the yield.
Well, if you're just mentioning about these intermediaries between the farmers and the exporters, Let me just be specific to the Ethiopian Commodity Exchange, or ECX. And people, or particularly exporters, have been just complaining, and even farmers have been complaining and just shifting their crops toward these other products. So what are the major issues with ECX?
Ethiopia is competing with Sudan, with Tanzania, with China, with Australia, many stakeholders in the field. All these countries are producing the same type of crops that Ethiopia is producing. So Ethiopia is competing with various countries who have got a better technology, better resource, and better marketing and promotion capabilities. So now, when it comes to the issue of Ethiopian Commodity Exchange, they don't directly buy from the farmer. There are so many intermediaries. They call them suppliers. These suppliers, they buy these commodities from various farmers, okay, and they put it in their warehouse, ECX warehouse. Then the exporters will buy from the Ethiopian Commodity Exchange platform. This doesn't ensure whenever you want to buy from the Ethiopian Commodity Exchange, you don't get adequate quantities that you want. Maybe you sign a contract for 5 containers, maybe in a month's time you get 1 container. So what's going to happen? You lose reputation, you lose your image, your country's image, and yet, whatever quantity you get, maybe the suppliers mix up, the bad quality with the good one, the old and the new crop, and maybe the flat and the round one. It's really very, very hectic and very, frustrating. So this way we cannot compete with the world. So most countries are coming up with a very stringent and a very strict import regulations, particularly agro-commodities. So if China is doing the same, if Turkey is doing the same, if Israel is doing the same, who are we going to send these commodities to? Unless we take a very appropriate and timely measure to alleviate this problem, to solve these issues, we are not going to compete with other competitors. So the role of ECX is it is a trading platform, but it doesn't work for an export commodity, because we faced, if you evaluate, the past journey, the journey of Ethiopian Commodity Exchange, I don't believe that it has really done good in that regard.
I also heard that some farmers also try just to contraband their products to other countries, and is that true? That is, if someone, for example, a company from India, they sign a contract with you, and as I told you earlier, if you are not delivering the goods in time to the port of loading, and yet this commodity is being, crossing the border to Kenya or somewhere else, they can get cheaper there. Because there is a report that, Ethiopian, for example, red kidney beans is smuggled into Kenyan border, and it is being labeled as made in Kenya and being exported to Pakistan and India. There is a very concrete and solid report about that. You can have many reports like live animals smuggling into Somalia and Djibouti, and cats the same way. So I think this very recently the government is taking a very coordinated prevention of contrabandists, but it was actually there. I have a report from the embassy of Pakistan that most tea and beans going to Pakistan is from Kenya, and it's originally from Ethiopia. So it's terrible. That's terrible.
Yeah.
Terrible.
So we have to have a very synergetic and coordinated effort in order to maximize these countries' foreign currency earning. And definitely I have a very strong faith that we can really double this in a couple of years.
Even it is just due to the ECX, some strict sort of procedures that farmers are just shifting from the legal way of marketing to ECX to the borders, just through borders to Kenya, Uganda, and so on.
Yeah, you can cite such examples for the farmers that are really very closer to neighboring countries like Kenya. If you go to Borona and Guji, whatever beans they are producing, they are not bringing it to the central market.
Yeah, it's not also it's not only beans or sesame, also other products.
Yeah, definitely.
Other products.
Yeah, definitely.
For example, just live animals.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. If you go to Homora, we are neighboring with the Sudan, so you can find Ethiopian sesame in Sudan. So in all parts of there is proliferation of borders and the illegal trades, I think these days, I think I knew that the government is taking a very serious measure these days, and things are being, a little better now.
Smoother.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that's good. So what do you think are just the ways out so that the Ethiopia's trade deficit can be narrowed or eliminated if possible? Because this Ethiopia, as you mentioned earlier, has been witnessing some big trade deficit, 12.4 billion US dollars. For example, that is just the peak, and it is in 2018, I think.
Yeah.
And after that, it is just slowing, but the deficit is still felt, and it is big. So what should the government, what should the exporters do in order just to alleviate this problem?
Actually, we have been in this type of record for quite a long time. Ethiopian, mainly Ethiopia is mainly importing most of the goods than that we export, and that is a balance of payment is not right. So the reason is that we are exporting as much as we are supposed to do, but as a nation we cannot continue that way. The government has taken some initiatives like import substitution, industrialization in industry, bringing in foreign investors or domestic investors into the industry so that they can engage in export-based manufacturing sector. You know that this year coffee has hit over $1 billion of earning, which has never been in history, and I can reassure you that we can do the same in pulses and beans and sesame, because if our borders are secured and the illegal trade is coming to the legal way, and if our exporters are engaged in adding value to our commodities, and the government is ready to incentivize this export sector, and if the land is being made available to the exporters so that they can produce and export themselves, because the world is moving from conventional to organic food.
Some more private sector.
Yes, the role of private sector must be
in
capitalized.
agriculture.
Yes, definitely. So if all these things come into existence, very recently I knew that there is a new authority that established very recently, Ethiopian Agricultural Authority. I think they segregated some part of the role of the Ministry of Agriculture and separately established authority. So they are mainly focusing on the regulations and this phytosanitary and the international issues. Definitely, I think the government is giving priority for enhancing this export, and we will do something definitely. But the government has to take the initiative, in providing, whatever the exporters is requiring, so that we can enhance, the foreign currency earning.
But we haven't just talked about policy framework, it's the incentive, it's legal issues, kind of things. So what is this your impression on that?
As I told you, it is only very recently that Ethiopia developed export strategy document. We don't have that. It's really a big gap in the export industry sector. Now the government realized that we need to have a policy in that regard, and it is being done. So it's underway, I think, to be a legal document. So exporters must need to have a mindset, to give a due emphasis that export must earn a profit to their own business. Otherwise, we cannot continue as a country like this with such a huge trade deficit gap. And the rest of the case, most countries like Vietnam, Turkey, we have made some research. India, China, we try to figure out how they incentivize their exporters. There are different mechanisms that we can give incentive to the exporters. And in Ethiopia, there is no such kind of things, and the government has to work out that and have to make a quick, decision as to how we can, the government can, provide us an incentive so that we can have very good quality, professional type of doing business.
Well, that's good. And the next point would be just the ease of doing business here in Ethiopia. Have you made just people appreciating or complaining about that?
Yeah, it's all about the bureaucracy,
In fact, bureaucracy is everywhere, even in America.
Yeah, it is there. Ease of doing a business is sometimes, we wrongly compare Ethiopia with highly advanced and developed countries which undergone, a series of developments, changes, amendments, and so on. you learn when you do something. We have never experienced these kind of things before. Everybody, in Ethiopia, we expect, things to go very smooth and easily. Okay. But recently, the government is developing these industrial parks, sure, and they are all equipped with high-tech technologies. Infrastructure is already made available. All the services are already there for you. I think that's a better option for that defines what you are saying. Otherwise, the routine way of doing a business in Ethiopia is not easy because of the bureaucracy. Yeah.
But the government is just saying that it is just changing some of the issues, some of the hurdles since it started the macroeconomic reform. So do you think, have you been feeling the effect since then?
Yeah. If you go to some ministries, there is really some change coming up, which we believe that, it takes quite some time. But still, the government has to put in place, a very serious, mechanisms as to how they can make sure that, the service is being reached there, and the customers are doing their business, especially the export sector. We need to obtain a maximum possible service in time, because this is not a contract which you can deliver domestic. It's an international agreement that binds your business. So whatever you are executing, you are already committed for someone to supply. It could be a factory, it could be an industry that this contract is back to back. So if you default in that contract, it has got a very negative impact on the company, and at the end of the day, your reputation of your country. So I think the government has to review all these export issues, and so that we can have a maximum income.
One thing that we should talk on is the FDI. One way that a country can boost up its export earnings is through the development of manufacturing sector. And this manufacturing sector is sometimes not adequate enough if it is just owned by locals due to some capital issues. And in this regard, bringing or attracting more foreign direct investment is that can just engage themselves in larger manufacturing industries would be a plus. What is your suggestion to the Ethiopian government?
Foreign direct investment is very helpful for countries like Ethiopia, who is actually growing, because these foreign investors must be screened very carefully in terms of their capacity, wealth, and what kind of technologies they are bringing into Ethiopia. Otherwise, most foreign direct investment, they came here and they trade, and they assemble, mobile phones in groceries and some shops, and they are doing, the business that we are doing. They come under the name of FDI. So the government has to make a very serious screening methods to ensure that these people are adding some value to our economy and our growth. Otherwise, foreign direct investment, you cannot stop it. Actually, it's a global phenomenon.
Sure.
And Ethiopia is part of the world, and we have to acknowledge that it is very important for us. And yet, my impression is that most Ethiopians have the potential to do what these foreign direct investments that we experienced are doing here. So mainly some countries use foreign direct investment as a means of earning foreign currency and boosting their economy. Especially they give a due focus for export industry sectors, like they come to the industry zone and they do something and export to the neighboring countries. But given that Ethiopia is an agricultural and agrarian economy, my still view is that a due emphasis and attention should be given to the local investors who are really capable and have a know-how to do things better and improve their way of doing it. It could be in terms of technology or adapting some new way of doing it, so that we can bring in foreign currencies. Because I have my own reservation about the FDI, but that does not mean that we don't need it. But we need it. The government has to do a very serious screening on them. Otherwise, sometimes they are, just coming and taking your share, for nothing, without adding value, to your economy.
Well, in line with this, just value addition is one of the challenges that you mentioned with Ethiopian exporters. So this can at least be tackled with the bigger manufacturers, the global manufacturers. So such global manufacturers come to Ethiopia and just process and export. That would also mean a lot to the currency earning. What do you think here?
Definitely, that is our future option. That's in my opinion, the future option that Ethiopia has, especially in terms of enhancing and boosting the export, which we already have, the existing agricultural commodities.
Okay.
The world is looking for food. The world is looking for safe food. Safe food is very hygienic, well protected. Okay, it is processed in a very hygienic way. So our exporters need to scale up their thinking of doing the business as usual, so that we can engage into value adding. It's an opportunity that the world is looking for food. And for your surprise, Ethiopian sesame, Ethiopian coffee, Ethiopian beans, Ethiopian chickpea, the best in the world. So we have to be a quality-oriented export house. The government needs to have a policy on the pesticide issue and the chemicals that we are using. So this needs to be done in a very organized way. We don't have such a national laboratory that can really identify aflatoxin in Ethiopia. So we have to send samples overseas. There is only one company called Boles. It's a private company and a laboratory. But the government needs to set up a mega large laboratory for seed analysis, whereby they can look into its quality in terms of microbiological and other hazards. These are the things that make your market, attractive, and your price, appreciate on that. So, going into value addition from the current exporter trend is a mandatory phenomenon for Ethiopia, because it's a huge opportunity for us. So that must be a priority in the future. And in fact, the government is giving incentive for, if you are adding, value addition for an agricultural commodity, you have a lot of incentives from the government.
Edo Abdi, thank you so much for joining ETV and just sharing your experiences as well as insights toward this Ethiopian export potential, the challenges so far and the ways out. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Dear viewers, this has been the conversation with Edo Abdi, who is owner of Edo International Trading and the Vice President of the Ethiopian Association for Pulses Oil Seeds and Spice Processor and Exporters. Thank you for joining us, and see you another time.